Timing is everything.
Yes, it is.
In everything.
Absolutely.
How are you doing?
Huh. Timing is everything.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
complain.
Nobody listens or
I
cares.
was gonna say I could, but there we
Now you
could,
say-
but
And the dog needs the room, so. Call this zoning board. Are we on for the IT? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I forgot. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes from the May 12th meeting. May I have a motion for approval?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Well, minutes are approved. I am going to move this down. We'll do the election of officers at the end because I want to be able to get our people who are asking for variances in first, because I'm sure you don't want to stay in here with a hotly contested election here. Let me tell you how this is going to work. You have asked the city and us to grant you a variance for an existing zoning rule. We're going to ask you to testify, and we're going to ask you to tell us why it'd be a hardship on you if you didn't have this variance granted. This is a legal proceeding, so we have the best court reporter in Northwest Ohio here recording every sound we make. So I'm going to ask that when you are coming up to testify, the first thing you do is state your name and address and speak into well, I guess we don't have to worry about, you can hear them and see them now, can't you? Because we don't have to read your lips. I will read the request. That will then ask the city to explain again and the existing zoning rule you're asking us to change for you. And then I will call you to come to the podium and explain why you want it. We will have a public discussion where the board members will ask you questions. Then I'll close the public hearing and we'll talk among ourselves. We'll come back, we'll take a vote. And when you leave tonight, you will know whether or not your variance has been granted. If it's not granted, you have the option of going to the Court of Common Pleas. Okay? The first request for variance is Bill, and I'm sorry if I'm not going to say this name right. Bill Schoenherr on behalf of Nova Vision Incorporated at 524 East Woodland Circle. I'm sorry, I need to swear you in.
I was just going to.
Okay, well, everybody who's going to speak, please stand and be sworn in.
And we do have to make sure we get the applicant that's on Zoom sworn in too.
Is there somebody on Zoom?
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Yes, that is
You
me.
don't have to stand, but could you raise your right hand, please?
Sure.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. You're now sworn in and we can do this officially. All right, Bill Schoenherr on behalf of Nova Vision Incorporated at 524 East Woodland Circle, zoned M3 Business Park, has requested a variance to allow the construction of a 10-foot by 288.1 foot driveway that would not be hard, a dustless surface for its entire length and area as required. Heather?
Yes, we're going to bring up my presentation. Thank you. So according to section 150.55 off-street parking, section F, any off-street parking or loading space or driveway or storage area for its entire length and area shall be a hard dustless surface. Under section 150.132 powers of the board, E, appeals to the board, under number 5, the board may grant a variance on 150.55F in any district. It is a little different because this property is zoned industrial, so they can request a variance also. However, they do have to follow conditions. Can we move him over a little bit? Can I do that? Move him out of the way? Thank you. So under A, that the property is not closer than 1,000 feet to any R or S-1 or S5 district. In this situation, that doesn't apply. Those zoning classifications aren't close. Under B, the facts and evidence support that the parking, loading, or storage area will not be subject to average traffic greater than 1 vehicle per hour. I'm sure he'll address that when he talks to the board. And C, that the paving of the parking, loading, or storage area, because of the nature of the items parked, stored, or loaded, that an asphalt surface would not withstand the weight of the items or vehicles, or that the minimum depth of the concrete would have to exceed 6 inches because the weight of the vehicles being loaded or used to move the stored items. And D, then agreement for an annual dust control as approved by the city engineer and annual inspection by a project inspector had been recorded with the deed to the property. So if the variance was approved, that is something the city would get from the applicant and then record, make sure it's approved by the city engineer and then recorded. Here's an aerial view of the property. So you can see the building there and their parcel to the south. They did add an addition in the back, which is why I assume they need their additional transformer and that drive access to the transformer. Using pictometry, here's a view of the property. This would be facing north. This would be facing to the west, I believe. And then this is the front of the building. And then this is the other side facing south. Here's a picture of the front of the property as you head towards the building on Woodland. And that is the stone driveway there, you can see there. Here's a better view looking down that drive. Here's another view of the front with the drive. Here's the sketch that was part of your packet where we highlighted that 10-foot access drive. We did not receive any written correspondence or any phone calls after sending our required letters. An advertisement was placed in the newspaper of general circulation as required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the administrative code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed, first class mail, to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedure requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Schoher? Please state your name and your address, please.
Bill Shaner, 1435 Muirfield Drive, Bowling Green.
Okay, now you can tell us why you're requesting this variance?
Okay. I think long story short, we had to add a second transformer due to the building expansion and some capital equipment investments. In the course of talking through city utilities, we needed to add the utility drive just for the simple fact to install the transformer. And so this was done after the original building plans. We'll take it as a miscommunication or misunderstanding on our part. We thought everything was on the plans shown as a stone drive. There was an inspector that came out later after the transformer was installed and the drive was in place and said it has to be asphalt. And so therefore here we are asking for a variance. In terms of addressing some of the other aspects, 1 vehicle per hour, the drive is never going to be used by us. I don't know to what extent the city will actually use it, maybe periodic maintenance. I really don't know. We really have no use for the drive. And, we've spent, let's say, roughly 10,000 excavating and putting stone in, and we would prefer to not have to asphalt it in addition to that. There are other options. Maybe perhaps we pull the stone back out and put dirt and grass back in place as opposed to adding asphalt, if that would be acceptable. But there's really no use for us to keep the drive unless the city has or the utilities have a requirement for it. So
Okay.
really it's cost avoidance is if you want to ask the question of what's the hardship, we would prefer not to spend additional monies.
Okay. Anyone on the panel have a question or comment?
I guess the only question I have is I take it the transformer is owned by the city?
Yes.
Okay. And they required a drive.
We were told to install it. Yes, that was needed. And I'm assuming, I didn't actually watch when it was installed, but I'm sure there was a flatbed that had to be brought out in a crane and to be put in place. So, I mean, I understand that. I don't understand the need for an asphalt drive. We will comply with dust control. There are other transformers that there are no utility drives are in the area. So, I presume it's very infrequent that the city would need to get in there to work on the transformer. Heaven forbid something happened at some point and had to be replaced, then the drive might be needed. But that's just conjecture on my part.
Do we have any other companies that have requested this out there?
I know we had, I think it used to be called Ag Chemical, I think it was called. In 99, they had a variance and got a dust agreement.
Hmm.
That's the last one we could find. So like
Hmm.
you said, it's pretty infrequent that happens.
It's kind of like you're between a rock and a hard place.
Nice. I have a dust control plan prepared based on what Heather sent me. So we're happy to comply with that.
Anybody else on the board have any questions or comments?
You just answered. I was going to ask, if we had a dust
Yeah.
control plan. So, and you answered that. So
Mhm.
And he answered how many vehicles would be covering on the area for us.
I guess I'd be interested to know what the city's need would be as far as, traveling back there for maintenance or some sort of inspection or meter reading. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, I think he indicated that it might be just as needed, so no one really knows.
Mr. Schoner, how far back is it? Is it just halfway back
Mhm.
for the length of your building?
It's roughly halfway back. Yes.
Mhm.
We've had an original building and 3 expansions now. So it's, it's near the center of the second building.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else in here wish to address this request? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll discuss it among ourselves and come back out and vote for you.
Thanks for your consideration.
Any comments or discussion?
I had none.
I guess,
Well,
go ahead.
go ahead.
ahead.
No,
I have none.
Rose, go ahead.
I
We
have
had
none.
none. My concern is, the fact that it's not going to be used very often. He indicated that he'd be interested in removing the drive and returning it to dirt and grass. However, if we did that, and we did have to get back in there with equipment and it was wet or soft, we wouldn't be able to use it. So I don't know that that's a logical
No, I thought
option
there
to
was a
us.
better option he's got now to have the gravel.
Yes.
Is the
That
stone,
was
the
my-
stone goes all the way to the road, right? Right. Any
Yes.
concern about washout or anything into the street?
Mhm.
I personally, my concern is, and after hearing what the scenario is, less with the company than if the city required them to put that in. And then I think about that park out there and, is it an industrial park or is it a different type of park? And every time I drive by there, and I know that we had a variance request and we were looking at heights of fences, and I drive by there and I see what I feel a couple of those companies just blatantly ignore the other rules and
Yep.
regulations.
Mhm.
And that just upsets me more than anything else.
Mhm.
So in this particular scenario, the last thing I want to do is see a burden put on the company at this point. And personally, I'd love to see exactly as Hobie's saying, take the drive out and grass it over. but
But
I'm
doesn't
certainly
seem
not
fair
gonna,
to have the company have to pay for that.
yeah, and I'm not gonna ask the company to pave it over if they've got a reasonable
Hmm.
plan for dust control at this point. So,
Anything else?
Would it be reasonable to ask for some feedback from the city? I mean, I feel like this is, you know what I'm
If there's
saying?
anybody here
I
from
don't
the
think he's
city who
lying to me,
wishes to
but-
comment on it, I don't want to put anybody in the city on the spot, but Mayor?
Well, I don't necessarily want to speak for Brian O'Connell and the Utilities Division, but I will say just based on my practical experience that the need for the city to access the transformer will be very infrequent. Really, if it needs replaced, there will be no regular use of the path for reading a meter, or there's really no ongoing maintenance related to a transformer or a piece of equipment of this type. So based on what I've heard, the fact that the path was sufficiently excavated, stone is of the proper grade and has been sufficiently compacted, and there's a dust control plan, that seems all very reasonable to me.
It
But
seems like they've
yeah,
met all the requirements.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
so just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, we're going to come back and I will ask for a motion, please.
so, okay,
Motion to approve as
Second,
I'll second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Will the secretary call the roll?
Okay. All right, Matt,
Yes.
Hess, yes. Judy Ennis.
Yes.
Toby,
Yes,
Chris Ostrowski,
yes.
Bob Waddle.
Yes.
Okay. Passes.
Your request for your variance has been granted. Thank you very much. Jimmy McCune, on behalf of Wallach Communities and property owners Lloyd and Linda Fight, has requested a variance to allow the construction of a 96-unit multifamily complex, which would provide 202 off-street parking spaces rather than the required 358 off-street parking spaces, a difference of 156 spaces, and would exceed the 40% maximum lot coverage by 10% for a total of 50% lot coverage, zoned R3, multiple family residential moderate density. Heather?
Thank you. I will add, we did not put a location in here like we should have because this is a
Kind of wonder about
odd
it.
scenario. It doesn't have frontage. And so we use the parcel ID number. So for the record, it's B07-511-303-303-04-6000. Best to describe it, I suppose, is kind of like a grid. It would be the 900 block of South Main Street, the east side of the street. And that it also is behind the second and three, or the 200 and 300 block of Napoleon. So it's behind Green Meadows, Winthrop Terrace, and their preliminary plan does show the potential for, or the likely, I would say, scenario of having the driveway from South Main Street. So you were probably all very familiar with Pagliai's, so it would be south of Pagliai's to give you a better idea. So it's a bit hard to get some pictures of the property. It's just vacant grass right now with some trees. You know, we're not going to enter private property to get pictures. So I do have some in the presentation that I'll go over. So under section 150.55 off-street parking, in the table 150.59A, the table is broken down by use and then the required parking. So multifamily residential, 1 space per 320 square feet or portion thereof is required. How the code also reads is that basically the outermost dimensions of your building and however many floors is how the parking square footage is calculated. Also, under section 150.16, bulk and density regulations, this is where we get that maximum lot coverage. So under the zoning district R-3, multiple family moderate density, you'll see the maximum lot coverage is 40%. So again, they are requesting up to 50%. They have discussed that that probably would be the maximum they would like for the lot coverage, just to have a little bit of wiggle room. Here is the aerial view of the property. So you'll see here, again, it has no frontage, but there's Napoleon to To the north and then to the west of the property is South Main Street. Midwood is to the south, and there's the railroad tracks there that run north and south. It is already zoned R3 multiple family. Using pictometry, this shows some views of the parcel as it is today. Again, not a whole lot to see there, but this gives you an idea of what's around there. I mean, it obviously is a pretty heavily concentrated multifamily area already, and then commercial. Here's, we try to get some pictures in some different areas that we could get to. So there's a picture of where the potential drive could be heading back there. And then here is, there's some storage units off South Main, basically behind WLI, and that's looking down that way. And another trying to get a view in that same area. Here is the site plan that was in your packet. I did give you larger copies tonight, so hopefully they're easier to see. I also have a 24-inch by 36-inch print if you want to see that also. I know everybody's eyes are different. We were just trying to save a little bit of money, trying to get you at least something to look at. We can pass that around if you need to. We did not receive any written correspondence. We did have some phone calls from neighbors, but it was just to ask, okay, where is this at? Because
Yeah.
obviously I told you already that we didn't do a good job of explaining that well. We do have maps, obviously, to send people, and so we didn't have any questions after we explained where it was at. An advertisement was placed in the newspaper of general circulation is required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the administrative code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed, first class mailed to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedural requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you. Mr. McCune? I'm assuming you are a Zoom participant.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, thank you, Heather. My name's Jimmy McCune with Wallach Communities, Vice President of Development. So just a quick little bit of background about Wallach. We are based in New Albany, just outside of Columbus. We have been around for about 50 years, and we develop, manage, own, and construct multifamily housing, primarily multifamily and senior living. So we are proposing a 96-unit apartment complex on the parcel that Heather mentioned. And this project will consist of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. The target population is going to be local workforce. So the state of Ohio essentially comes out with data every year and kind of gives us, the developer, sort of an idea of where more affordable housing options are needed. And Wood County is pretty much in the higher bracket of the state in terms of having a multifamily housing gap. So we thought it would be a good need. So what we are proposing to do is we are going to apply for State of Ohio Housing Trust Funds through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, along with short-term tax-exempt bonds that would allow us to make the project financially feasible. So that process basically allows us to secure equity and additional financing for the project's construction. I do want to, because there's oftentimes some sort of confusion about kind of what the project actually is itself. It's not like subsidized or Section 8 or anything like that, but the rents are going to be targeted to individuals making up to 80% of the area median income. So with that said, not to get into too great a detail, we are asking for 2 variances, Heather mentioned. One being for the 50%, or I'm sorry, to exceed the 40% lot coverage, and the other for 202 parking spaces. And they're somewhat linked because, we have found that in our management, history, that 2 spaces per unit is appropriate. And per the Ohio Housing Finance Agency rules and regulations, we do have to have a certain amount of green space along with parking. So, the more parking spaces we would add, the less green space and essentially more lot coverage we would need. So we're trying to find sort of a happy balance, if you will. But yeah, so we will, the project's funds will be applied for on June 18th. And then we will find out if we were awarded those funds based off a competitive process sometime in August. And then obviously we would come back for a full site plan review. I mean, everything is very preliminary at this point. It's just sort of the world that we live in, if you will. Yeah, and we tried to architecturally add some more parking spaces, but it would essentially cut into our clubhouse on our stormwater basin that's on the southern corner of the site, you know, which I'm not an engineer, but it needs to be a specific size for stormwater runoff. And, you know, again, the more parking spaces that cuts into our lot coverage. And, you know, like I said, we're trying to find sort of the right balance. So those are the two variances that we're requesting this evening. If anybody wants any more detail on the project, I'm happy to provide that, or answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Members of the panel, do you have any questions for him?
I do, as probably the rest of the panel does. First, I want to ask you, sir, Mr. McCune, what is your hardship?
Hardship in terms, I'm sorry.
And it would call for you to need to have a zoning variance. What would be the reason why that really needs to be done?
So, you know, I would say that in terms of the parking, if we were to meet the requirements, our unit count would have to be, you know, significantly reduced, thereby making the project financially infeasible given the funds that we're allowed to receive. And again, that kind of goes into the lot coverage calculation, because we're trying to achieve some level of density. You know, unlike, you know, probably some of what we like to call, you know, market projects or student housing projects you see, the rents that we can charge the residents are limited. They're capped essentially. So we can't leverage as many funds as those types of projects can. So we have to achieve an economy of scale.
Okay, I understand that from your perspective. However, when you present a plan, your plans indicate that this is targeted towards the 80% of the medium income of our area, 2 spots per unit. As I look at your drawings, you had 16 units in each of the buildings.
Mhm.
You know, in this era that we live in, people are not just satisfied with 2 cars. They usually have a boat, or they've got a RV, or they have something else that occupies space. They cannot accommodate guests that might come visit them. You're building units that are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. 3 bedrooms would indicate that there would be more than 2 people living in a home, some of which could be of driver's age. I'm concerned about the fact that the number of parking spaces that you're requesting would be impractical.
Understood. Yeah, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. You know, I would say too that the transit availability too certainly can help alleviate that. And, you know, and sort of what we have found, again, and just in our management history, is that typically 2 and 3 bedroom units, you know, the max number of cars that they have is 2. I mean, we anticipate a lot of our residents to have children, you know, working families with one, and we do in fact find too that a lot of renters of our 3 bedroom units they're only 2 households. So I understand where you're coming from. I just, you know, that was the 202 parking spaces was kind of like the sweet spot we were trying to find.
Could you give me the breakdown of the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units?
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second here. You have to forgive me, my internet is being a little slow.
6.
So we're going to have 18 one bedrooms, 42 two bedrooms, and 36 three bedrooms.
How many two bedrooms again, please?
42.
42.
42.
Excuse me, can I speak? Right. Is he done?
Rose, are you talking?
Huh?
Are you asking?
Is he done asking?
I'm sorry, what are you saying?
Is
Chris, are you done with your
No,
question? She wants, I think Rose wants to ask a question.
Actually, go ahead, Rose. I got a couple.
Oh, okay. I had a couple of questions. How are you going to target your renters? How are you going to find them? How are you going to advertise? And how will you prevent, say, students from renting?
Well, so students can technically live, at the property. However, they have to be income qualified and income tested. I'm not a management expert, but I believe that under the tax credit program, which we are applying for, if you are under a certain age, and Tyler, who's my colleague, who's also on the line, you can jump in if I'm misspeaking. But I believe there is a certain age limit, and I believe it's 21 and older. So you have to be, you have to make below a certain percentage of the area median income, and our management team will income test and validate any renters that may come in.
Sure, and I'll just add that full-time students do not qualify.
Hold on,
For
please, sir.
the-
Can you give us your name and address?
Sure, my name is Tyler Ponder. I swore in earlier at the beginning of the meeting. Address
Sir,
120.
we need to swear you in also before you speak. I can't see you, but I'm going to assume you're raising your right
There
hand.
he goes.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, continue. And he left.
Tyler, you still there?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm sorry. Do I still need to be on video?
Yes, you can give
Yes.
us your address and
Yes.
continue.
Sure. 160 West Main Street, New Albany, Ohio, 43016. And I'm sorry, Jimmy. Can you remind me of the question at hand?
Students?
Student qualifications under the tax credit program.
Yes, it's my understanding that full-time students cannot qualify for the low-income housing tax credit program. I think part-time students can, as long as they have an income, but not full-time students.
Yeah.
So this will not turn
That's
into
correct.
a student housing
Well-
complex.
As full-time students, they don't qualify for the rate, but they do qualify for normal price, correct?
Normal price in terms of market rate?
Correct.
Yes, correct.
The students can live there.
Well, no, because students can't live yet. I mean, yes, they would technically qualify for what's called a market rate, but given their essential status, they would not be qualified to rent these units.
Well, they wouldn't be
would
able to
not- they would
rent
not
at that
qualify
rate.
based
They'd
on their
be able,
income.
they wouldn't qualify for the rate, but you can't disallow students.
Can't discriminate.
You can't discriminate against students. So they'd have to be a market rate. They just wouldn't qualify for the special.
Right.
I've done property management 20 years. I know tax credit properties. You could have students there potentially.
Yeah. Okay. I see where you're coming from. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you.
So you could have potentially in a 3-bedroom unit, 6 students, all having cars.
Yes. I mean, in theory.
But in this town with students, that happens in practice, not just theory. So I think you'd be woefully underserved with a reduction of 44% of the parking spaces. That's a huge reduction for those number of bedrooms. You got 210 bedrooms
Right.
that and our population of student renters in the city is rather high. So potentially to fill the gap, you would have to rent the students to fill the apartments.
Yeah, I mean, so we did have a professional market study done that shows, essentially all the entire population of our primary market area, which was more or less Wood County. And it breaks it out by the people that would income qualify to live there. And the units themselves would only need to capture 2% of that population to lease it up to 95% occupancy, which is considered stabilized. The lower the number, so I mean, that indicates to us there is an enormous demand for this type of housing.
I know Bowling Green Village is a tax credit property, and they have quite a few students filling their units.
Yeah, I mean, you're right where you're coming from, but we wouldn't market these to students. It would be strictly for the local workforce.
I think they find them whether depending where you market them.
Yeah.
Can I ask, does your financing restrict your rental rate? I mean, is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah. So essentially our rents are capped at a certain limit. It's a calculation that's based off the area median income.
For those people that meet the requirements.
Correct.
For those people that don't meet the requirements, they would get market rate rent.
Yes, but we can't charge market rate rent because our rents are capped.
But only for those who qualify for the rate, correct?
Right, and if they don't qualify for the rate, we have to essentially turn them back.
Because of your financing.
Correct, because of the tax credit LURA land use restriction agreement that'll be on the property. It's a very strict and
Well, you wouldn't have to turn them away by law. You would actually, if they qualify, would have to accept them.
If they qualified, yes. In
But
terms of their income.
For those rates, but if they didn't meet those rates, you could still rent to them. Legally.
No, we can't.
We cannot.
As I'm looking at this, whether or not they're students, you have the possibility to have 210 individuals living in your apartments. And 210 might each have a car, and they'll have friends. They're going to have, like, if they only had 10% friends, you're still going to have more possible cars than you're asking for spaces.
That's assuming you only have one person in each bedroom.
Right, you could
Right.
have.
Yeah,
you
well,
could-
I'm assuming that, and that's not probably logical to assume that, but I am concerned that your spaces, your requests for your spaces, you're really limiting. And I could see people coming in and parking all over the place and other areas that are around there. I'm just not real comfortable that 202 parking spaces is going to be enough for the size of the individuals you expect to have in your apartments.
I'd like to ask two site questions, if I could.
Sure.
First of all, and again, I couldn't get a good look online today, much as I should have, and didn't go back to the site, but that area in the southwest corner, isn't that part of the property plot? And I don't know what is there that you have not incorporated into your overall lot? Is that a marshy area or an unusable space?
Yeah, it's so this was kind of something we had to go back and fix. So apparently there was a survey done that cut out that southwest corner that I believe it's still owned by the Fights, and they have no intention of selling that. So even though it's a part of the parcel, that piece was never actually recorded. So we're basically going to have to lot split that out. So they didn't want to sell us that sliver.
Okay. And then the other thing, your engineers, did you talk about additional costs, what the additional cost might be and what it would do? I understand your restrictions on the rent, but for underground stormwater collection and being able to put parking on top of that?
Can't do
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I feel like I mean, we have explored that in the past at some of our senior living communities, but
Mhm.
on a project like this, it wouldn't be able to support it financially.
You can't do that. Can't do that.
Can't?
Cannot.
Hmm.
You have to have the retention pond.
Well, what I'm calling for is underground retention.
You do that.
That's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all right. Okay.
I'm confused about who will own this. Are the fights involved in this? Or will they be managers or who manages it? Is it on site?
Yeah, so it's on site. There will be a clubhouse on site with a full-time, management, leasing team, maintenance professionals that will be employed by Wallach. So Wallach will be the developer who I represent, the owner, manager, and will also be the general contractor. And another thing too, I should add is that, because of the tax credit equity that we will receive, we will be the long-term owners for 15 years. So it's not like a market rate property. We would build it and then turn it around and sell it in 3 or 5 years, whatever the case may be. So we would be the long-term owner and manager.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yeah, well, I agree with the need for the units. I'm uncomfortable with the number of parking spaces. I'm comfortable with the other variance about the 30% coverage. But the parking spaces, I think is just asking for trouble.
I could support this if they would reduce the number of units. A fewer bill.
Or
Are we-
change their request for parking spaces to a smaller number.
Are we in discussion right now?
No.
Or- Okay.
No,
Well, we didn't yet officially.
but
We haven't gone into private yet, so.
Okay.
Is there anyone here who wishes to address this?
I had one other question. How many square feet are the apartments?
So they are, and these are,
I was doing a calculation to see if you could like reduce it, the number from 96 to 60. And I was using 1,180 square feet based on the number of total square footage and came up with something like 60, which would be 70,800 square feet. And that would require 221 parking spots. I don't have a background in finance, but I just don't understand why that would not be financially attractive.
well, so the amount of funds that will, I mean, I guess first and foremost, our density, like I said, allows us to achieve a level of economies of scale. It probably what you're suggesting probably would have worked 6 months ago, but I mean, the cost of lumber, I'm sure as people have heard, has just gone through the roof.
Right.
So, the more density we have, the more units we have, the more finance we qualify for, the more so I mean, it kind of just rolls up into it kind of rolls up into just making the project underwrite better financially. Also too, we're our land costs are essentially, they are what they are, so that's not going to change. So I mean, that's the reason for the 96 units and hence the parking spaces. We can certainly try and get creative with the parking spaces. I mean, like I said, all that we really need to submit for funding is the proof of zoning, but the variance kind of is something we wanted to sort of get ahead of.
What's your projected timetable?
So if the project was successful, like I said, it would be awarded its trust funds in August. And then, it would take us about 8 months to a year to gather all of our due diligence, secure our financing, and then we would close, probably around this time next year and begin construction. And the construction period would be about 12 to 16 months.
Okay, thank you.
So that additional spot that Fights Are Not Selling to you guys, that would alleviate the parking issue, correct?
I don't know if we could get to the required 358, I believe, but I mean,
Yes.
Get you a lot closer.
it would get us closer, yes. But I just don't think they want to sell that to us. I believe that, and I don't mean to speak for them, but I believe that it's been in their family for a while and they may have had some plans with that. So they didn't want to sell us that portion.
Anybody, any other comments, questions?
I would be remiss in really reminding the zoning board of appeals that the city right now is redoing our entire zoning code with a reduction in pavement and parking as one of our major priorities. And so I'm telling you that, I think I've told you this before, is that we don't want another Walmart where we're designing for Christmas one day a year. We don't want another Meijer. And so I'm just pointing that out to you all, that I just want to be careful that as the city is telling you this is a priority, that you're weighing that with your decision, because I wouldn't want to come back, 6 months from now and say, oh, now all of a sudden he only needs 202 spots because we've updated our zoning code. So
In
again,
addition,
just giving that caution. I do think our parking calculations are very, very
Liberal.
extreme. And we've calculated the entire building, the entire footprint. So hallways, closets, everything. And so, again, I'm not advocating either way. I'm just giving you the facts that I want you to be cautious with that and just know again how our code works right now and how it may change.
also, I'd like to point out that I sat on the Community Action Plan Task Force, and one of the things that kept coming up in discussion from Camiros, who we paid an exorbitant amount of money to, but they came up and said that Bowling Green could definitely utilize more high-density housing, and they do not need as many parking spots because a lot of people today choose to have either one car per household or have no car per household. They just rely on transportation as a service, meaning, Uber or public transportation or work from home. So the number of cars per household is actually going down, which would lend itself to changes in ordinances and so forth.
Yeah, but we're not a real big town on public transportation like most cities are.
I understand.
Doing the high
We have our
density.
bikes.
I also think there'd be a pretty easy way to solve the problem. I think you just limit the number of parking spots per unit. If it's a 1-bedroom apartment, you say there's one parking spot available and that's it.
And we have done that in the past, and we would certainly be willing to do that, is to assign spaces. And that's a management thing, and we would basically mark every stall, just like any other place that has restricted parking. And I would just add too that, we are in no way, we don't expect this to be our final develop. This is just our initial proposal to secure the funding needed to build the housing. So we anticipate to come back probably times over if the funds are awarded for a site plan review, meet with the engineer, fire department, police department, school board, all those types of things.
Thank you.
And I would like to just also mention as well that the less parking that we have, the more open space we have, the easier it is for stormwater to be removed, and the easier it is for the children to actually play in the grass as opposed to the parking lots.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to close the public hearing and we will discuss it among ourselves. Any comments?
I think you're cutting 44%, almost half of the parking. That I'm uncomfortable. I've done property management for 20 years, and I've seen places with lots of parking, places with not enough parking. I'd put this area where not enough parking. Even if you figure not everybody's gonna have a car, you're gonna have no guests. If you're gonna have families there, you're gonna have guests.
I would like to say first that I have no opposition to this type of development. I think it would be welcome to fix some of the problems we have. So that's not a prejudice. What does concern me, however, is the parking. And although I recognize what they're trying to accomplish, I also recognize what the city is thinking about doing in the future. But because we don't have a firm answer on that end, I'm reticent to shoot for something in the dark and hope that it's somewhere close to what the city wants to do later on. I would rather offer that we discuss this one on its own merit rather than what we might be doing later on as a city.
I'll agree that 358 is a bit excessive for parking. I think it's more, that's a bit much. I don't think 202 is enough.
Heather, let me ask you an unfair question.
Well, you staged that great.
Go for it, Bob.
If we voted this down today, okay, and it went forward with, and the city went forward and changed some of the rules, which either they met and wouldn't require a variance, or if they were able to shift things and add X number of parking spaces or X percentage of green space, what qualifies them to come back for a request?
Well, they can certainly come
They
back
can
with a
come
new
back.
plan
With-
or
with-
amended
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, they
With
Yes.
any
definitely.
change whatsoever?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, they can come back.
Okay.
You
Anything
know,
else?
it's only been 2 years that are we now in private? Private now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You know, we just passed that ordinance.
Joan's
Oh,
trying to
I'm sorry,
record
Joan,
you.
I'm sorry. We just passed that ordinance, what, 2019? The 60/40. So here,
No, we've
when
had
was that?
the lot coverage in all the districts. Well, for the most part, we added it to the residential single-family
Okay.
district. So it already was in the R3.
so it was 40 before. We're
Well,
trying
we
to-
didn't change that. We only
Okay.
added it to R1 and
Okay.
R2 single-family zoning.
So we're trying to reduce asphalt. And
Correct.
they're
Oh,
re-
yes, absolutely.
And it bothers me that they want to increase it. That's what bothers me. I want less asphalt.
Well, they're asking for less parking.
I
So
know
that
they're
would
asking
be,
for less parking spaces, so I'm not
But,
sure.
well, one of the requests was the 50% coverage, lot coverage.
That includes the buildings though, too.
Yeah, yeah.
right.
And it's supposed to be what, 40?
40% max with
Yeah.
all impervious
Mhm.
surfaces.
So,
Suppose I would be
Yeah.
remiss not to mention that the parking does require us to go up to that 50% level. If we didn't have to meet the parking, we could be well below
mm,
that 50%.
Anything else?
Can I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
We're actually not in public session right now.
Oh, well,
Oh, all right.
let me come back into public session and then you can ask a question. Are we done with the private discussion? So now we can come back into the public? Okay, we're back in the public discussion. So yes, sir, you can ask a question.
Thank you. My question is, and the gentleman in the yellow shirt, I'm sorry, what was your name again? You alluded to this earlier. Would it be okay? And it maybe this needs to be, I guess, looked into, but would you be okay with possibly approving the parking spaces at a certain number? And we can go back and rework the drawings?
I think I would have to see the design plan and make sure the number of units haven't changed, the size of
agree.
units.
I would rather see the plan first and then make the approval.
Well, along those lines, gentlemen, can we ask, I wasn't certain in your definition of what you needed to have today to go forward with that financing. I mean, do you have to have approval? Do you have to have everything in place that would flow through, or essentially you're in the proper zoning area, et cetera? So you could go forward asking for your funding, but you'd still have this hurdle of a variance to overcome at some point in time.
True. Yeah. So all that we really need is proof of zoning. You know, we
And you
technically,
have that.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
you have
yeah,
that.
we do.
Yeah.
And like I said, the purpose of this was to try to get ahead of it. And, that just, we haven't I guess this was a good way for
Okay.
Tyler and myself to introduce ourselves to everybody, because I've worked with Heather and Katie over the past couple months on this. And I haven't met really anybody outside of the walls of Wallach in my own house three-dimensionally. So, so yeah, no, from the rules of the state agency, essentially all that we need is a letter from either a Katie or Heather saying that the project is zone R3. And I don't know, and maybe this is a question to ask, like I said, we don't technically need to have site plan approval for submission. So would variances like lot coverage and parking, would that fall under the site plan approval? Because I mean, I guess technically the way I see it is that we don't conform to the zoning code as it's currently written. And I mean, if we had to table this conversation and redo our architectural plans, we would have to wait another year to submit, because the submission's next week. So this is this funding cycle happens once a year.
No, would be my answer to that. No, you don't have to. And you're obviously free to come back and resubmit a different or the same plan to us again. Once, but it's not that you don't need this variance for your funding, is basically what we said. I mean, what you said, you have it's zoned correctly for you and you can go ahead with your funding, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that is correct.
Why would he waste cycles though, doing that legwork? I'm probably speaking out of turn. If there's a potential hurdle in place that could thwart the entire project, why would he even go forward wasting,
Question for him.
bankers' time? So probably speaking for him, and I shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say too that, I mean, it's a competitive process. I mean, I would say that there's probably, in this type of funding round, Tyler, what would you say? Maybe 30 applicants and probably 15 to 20 actually get awarded. However, what does make this actually competitive is that we're applying for Ohio Housing Trust Funds, which are, distributed annually. And the state of Ohio has a statutory obligation to fund certain types of projects in what they call non-participating jurisdictions. And that's kind of a fancy word for anything that's considered rural. So outside of like the 3 Cs, Dayton, Toledo, Akron. So, we feel confident about its competitiveness. And I guess, maybe we can submit under the assumption that, pending final site plan approval, because like I said, this from beginning construction is well over, well over 6 months to, possibly a year away.
Yeah, and I don't want us to forget about the big picture here. And I mean, this development, we're talking about 10, 12 plus $1 million in investment in the community, and we believe in this, and we're excited about this, and we don't want that to get held up by parking. So, to Jimmy's point, we are in a cycle, and cycles come around and cycles go, and this opportunity may or may not be here next year. So we want to take advantage when we can.
Yeah, and our agreement, I would say too, with the fights only goes through essentially this funding round. So if we decide to put the project on hold, or it's not successful in receiving its funding, we would probably have to cancel the purchase and sale agreement that we do have in place.
Yeah, I agree. I think this type of building is needed in BG, but I don't feel comfortable shorting other areas just to push a project through.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Oh, you
Is
certainly
it totally
may.
inappropriate? I won't, but I am just dying to know how our regulations compare to other communities you worked in. Have you had to apply for other variances? And In relation to that, have you had apartment complexes such as this not have enough parking that you've had to go back and fix?
Most of our developments are way oversubscribed on their parking. We have a project somewhat similar to this. I mean, again, it's a lot smaller. It's in London, Ohio. It's 48 units, so half the size. But Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong. There's, I think there's well over 100 spaces there, and I mean, every time I ever go there, there's hardly any cars there.
No, that's right, Jimmy. And one of the things that we want to avoid, especially in college towns, is for there to seem like there's more parking and for people to kind of gravitate towards that parking. Hey, let's park our car at our friend's apartment. Hey, let's go party because they've got extra spots. We want to avoid that. I mean, this is general occupancy. This is family housing, and we don't want to necessarily create a draw for those individuals or students, to feel like this is a place that they can come and party or store their cars.
Well, that's easy to correct. You just make it resident only and make parking stickers. That's what the other apartment complexes in town do. But and your point of going somewhere and there's lots of spaces. I've managed apartments for 20 years. During the day, there's a lot of spaces, and at night is when it gets really crowded.
So back to my original question, what do other codes require? And maybe it's not a fair question if you're not the engineers and planners. And have you had to do other variances? Again, I'm just trying to get out of my planner curiosity if our code is way off base, and maybe it's not a fair question to you both.
Well, I can speak for a project that we just recently applied for in Marion, and that requirement was 2 spaces per unit.
There you go.
Okay.
I apologize. It was off. For some reason it went.
Would want to enter into the discussion. Did you get your?
I think I constantly hear about the need for housing in town. We have a lot of people that work here in town and then they leave. They don't live here. I guess I'd like to try to keep those folks in town, and if I'm being selfish, keep their tax dollars in town as well.
Yeah, but I also had the same complaints about not enough parking.
I totally understand. But what do other parking? I mean, if there's no parking spots, there's no parking spots. I mean, and then what? They just have to park somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that's just the problem. Why shouldn't be able to park in front of your home? Why do you got to park somewhere else?
Well, but if you have a parking badge I have a assigned parking spot, I as a resident can park in my parking spot.
Well, yeah, but what if you have 2 kids that are driving and you only get 2 spots? They got to park their car somewhere else.
But I guess you don't get a car,
Yeah.
or you
Well,
choose to.
That's fair to them.
That's the nature.
I've seen parking in this town, an apartment complex that are as absolutely abysmal, and people are parking 2 cars deep, or they're parking across sidewalks. The parking issue is a serious one, and I think just trying to push a project through without enough parking, I think, is a huge mistake.
Well, could I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Would you be willing to look at some of your green space and convert that to some additional parking as a counter proposal?
That changes the coverage and makes it worse and doesn't help rows. I mean, there's bigger runoff than for the pond.
Right.
But the underwater storm would solve the problem as well.
Yeah.
So
Our
it's
zoning
nice giving up
code-
the solar property, so it would reduce the
Just
number
a
of
second,
units.
just a second. It's just one person talk at a time, and Heather.
Our zoning code also has a green space requirement for
Yeah.
multifamily too.
Yeah.
So if they tweak that, they might be looking at another issue.
There's other solutions that can be looked at and they can be submitted, like the underwater storm sewer, the additional purchase of the other property from fights, the reduction of units.
I'd like to see some reduction in units. You mentioned that other project that you have that has 48. Is that profitable?
Well, that was under a different type of program where we were allowed to ask for more funds from we were basically allowed to ask for more tax credits. So there was enough, money coming into the project that, allowed us to do 48 units. And also at that time, the funds that we were competing for, the amount of units that you could construct were capped. Where this it's not capped. Going back to the green space thing, I just wanted to add that the project will have to from state of Ohio rules is that we would have to achieve some type of enterprise green certificate or LEED, most likely LEED silver. And that requires a certain number or a certain percentage of green space throughout your project to achieve a certain level of points to meet that requirement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Have you looked at other locations in Bowling Green to build?
We looked at another site off of I believe it was Napoleon. And long story short, and Heather or Katie, if they're there, they can maybe provide some background, but that was the site we were first pursuing, but it was roughly the same size, but I think the seller wanted to sell it to maybe a retail store or something like that. It was behind a flower.
Classes. Okay, is there any other questions or discussions? I'm going to ask for a motion, please.
So we have 2 variances voting on.
It's combined in one variance. One is. We'll go
One
down-
vote will cover both?
Yeah, it'll cover both.
Okay.
Because they're dependent on each other. Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Who's second, Matt?
Matt.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, will the secretary call the roll?
Okay,
please?
Hobie.
Get me first.
Hobie.
No.
Chris.
No.
David's absent. Bob.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Oscar? Hess, no. Judy.
Yes,
3 and 3 fails.
it failed.
Okay.
A tie means it was not granted.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. We'll, maybe we
You
can
know,
bring.
you have options. You can work with the planning department to see if you can do something different with your parking spaces, or you can go to the Court of Common Pleas.
Okay,
Okay?
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
appreciate it, guys. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, the last variance is, and I'm sorry, I may not get this last name right. Lee Libertro, 909 North Main Street, has requested a variance to allow the construction of addition, a U-shaped deck around a pool that would be 32 feet wide and 16 feet deep, which would encroach 19 feet into the required 20-foot rear yard setback, existing lot of record. Heather?
Thank you. Under section 150.86, existing lots of record, exceptions and modifications, 150.85, general requirements and regulations specified in this chapter shall be subject to the exceptions, modifications, and interpretations set forth in 150.85 through 150.93. Specifically under 150.86, existing lots of record, in any district where single-family dwellings are permitted, a single-family detached dwelling may be erected on any lot as defined in 150.03, 40 feet or wider, of official record as the effective date of this chapter, irrespective of the area of the lot. Under A, in no case shall the depth of the rear yard of any such lot be less than 20 feet. So in this case, this house was built well before the adopted 1975 zoning code. So typically it's zoned R2 single family would be 30 foot for the rear yard requirement, in this case 20. As you can see by the aerial view, this is the house and garage. It's all attached, so it's one structure. So it already really does encroach into that rear yard setback because the garage ends way back here. And it's again considered all one structure. There is an alley in the back there that you can see. Using pictometry, you can see here's the side of the house facing north. Again, there's the garage and the house. There was a pool there before. She is approved for another pool, and that is compliant. And then we recently issued a permit for a privacy fence. So again, that's compliant. We're just talking about the deck she wishes to put around the pool. Here's the back of the house. So you can see that alley, and then again, that area where the pool was, and it's pretty much going in a similar area. Here's the other side of the house that'd be facing south. And then here's the front. Here's a picture of the front of the home. And here's the back of the house trying to angle from the alley. Here's another view of the back. And then here's a better view angled towards the back of the house and the garage. Here's the sketch. I know that's hard to see there, but that was within your packets. That dash line is what we're calling the U-shaped deck to basically be adjacent to the house garage and then go around that pool. We did not receive any phone calls or letters. An advertisement was placed in the in the newspaper of general circulation is required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the Administrative Code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed first-class mail to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedure requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you. We put your friend to sleep there, so. And you want to say to your address too, please, for the reporter?
909 North Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio, 43402.
Pardon?
Swear in.
Were you sworn, you weren't sworn in?
No.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Now you can proceed.
What would you like to know?
We'd like to know why you want to create the deck, and if not being able to create it, why you consider it a hardship. You're asking us to take an existing zoning rule and change it for you. So we need to know.
Okay, well, my yard is not in good shape. It slopes down to the alley and then it slopes away to the parking lot. My backyard is a parking lot. I've been next to Al Smith's dealership for many years. Putting up the privacy fence, I want privacy. The deck, what you can't see on the, may I approach?
Sure.
Okay.
Just make sure that you're talking loud enough so the reporter can pick up what you're saying.
Back house, very bad, large. Past couple of weeks. That gives a lot of shade. That was what I want. The deck, it's above ground. I just want it to look. I need a deck. Nobody else. It'll look really nice to me, and all that dirt that's, oh, I can fill my yard up in the back. I'm just a little woman with a dog. Wants to enjoy me.
Okay. Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments?
Any other options on the deck to reposition it so that it wouldn't be so close to the alley?
No, I have danced around with a tape and a screwdriver in the backyard and I've been doing this for a couple of months trying to figure out the best place, and this is what's going to work for me. And I even tried making the decks smaller. Then you can't fit any furniture on there.
Or a large dog?
Yes, or a large dog.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
How high is the fence?
6 foot.
6 foot.
Did we approve that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I don't
We
remember.
did administratively. Zoning board didn't need to.
No.
It complies. It's in the backyard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see the deck anyway, because it's a 6 foot fence
Okay,
around. the-
because initially I had concerns about someone sitting on the edge of the deck, 1 foot away from that alley.
Nope, I got that covered.
That could be very, very iffy.
That could be bad.
Is that a city alley?
Yes.
It's not private.
Anything else? Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, we'll close the public hearing unless there's someone here who would like to speak to it. And we'll go into private discussion. Anybody? Yes, we'd all want to pet the dog, frankly. That's the gist of our private discussions.
It was that or a picture of margaritas. I didn't know which way to go.
Hearing
Well,
none,
Oh, just one of the fence is going to be on the edge or 1 foot in? 1 foot?
It'll probably be 1 foot in,
So then what are you going to do with what's on the other side of the fence?
put gravel down.
Oh, okay. Seems ridiculous to have grass there.
Right.
Have to.
Well, that's another reason I kind of wanted the deck the size it is. I want to be able to access to mow back there, but I don't want to have to go between the deck and a fence.
Right.
okay, we're coming out of private, and going into the public hearing. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Motion has been made and seconded. Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Uh-huh. Matt,
Yes.
Judy Ennis.
Yes.
Toby Johnson.
Yes.
Rose Hess, yes. Chris Ostrowski.
Yes.
Bob Waddle.
yes.
Okay.
Your request for your variance has been granted.
Thank you.
Now you
very
can bring your
much.
dog so we can all pet him. Before we go to, oh, look at him come. We need to have the election of officers as our last, he should be president.
Happy dog.
What is sweetie? Do I see here a nomination for chairperson?
Judy?
I'll second that.
Thank you, gentlemen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Vice Chair, I will nominate Hobie.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, Secretary? Rose?
I'll nominate Rose.
I'll second
that. It is decided.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Carried. Congratulations, guys. We got another year.
Put that
And you
down as
can be our
unanimous.
mascot anytime you want.
It wasn't.
Motion for
unanimous.
adjournment?
So moved.
Okay.
Hobie got it.
Don't forget you have to sign before you leave.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you very much.
My dog does not sit that quietly ever.
Okay.
Actually, I
here.
was.
One more lady.
This is Harry, but
You know,
Election, I
Not
was
as
gonna ask
quiet.
Joe, I don't, at some point in time,
I'm
he told me
busy,
he's
buddy.
gonna throw me off. If this was the end of the year, I was expecting him to throw me off.
No, they would come and give you a citation.
Hey, I apologize. You saw me turn it off. That's from the sheriff. And that's, I gotta come to work call.
Oh.
And so obviously he can override my.
Evidently.
phone.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I